Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a company valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. I have the privilege today of discussing strategic planning and how to sell a business today with Jennifer Smith, a business broker in Cape Girardeau, Missouri with Murphy Business. What is the first step to sell your business? And then what are some of those initial things, not only, prepping a couple years ahead of time, but what else should they know about that first step to sell your business?
Yeah. So it all starts with that valuation and setting those expectations. I would say easily 70 or 80% of the time, the conversation is, oh, that's all I can get for my business, right? We recently had a really, really difficult conversation with a client with a very, very nice retail operation, several million in sales, really, really nice company, good earnings. And he thought that he knew what his business was worth based on reading the Wall Street Journal. He thought that, when they were talking about a business kind of like his a little bit, maybe 10 times bigger, but, kind of in the same industry as his, that it was selling for 5 to 7 times EBITDA, that was something that he could apply to his situation. Not realizing that he was reading about a business that was in a whole different sandbox. It was in that middle market sandbox that we were talking about earlier, as opposed to the Main Street sandbox that he was in. So instead of that 5 to 7 times EBITDA, he was looking at probably 3 times a recasted seller discretionary earnings, which is a vastly different number, right? Mm-hmm. So the problem is he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and they were bringing in hospice, and he was trying to get his affairs in order and get his wife educated as to what the business was worth because she needed to sell it after he had passed. And the gap between the actual valuation and what his expectations were based on that Wall Street Journal article, the chasm was heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It was just heartbreaking. And that's why we say, gosh, that very first step, get that valuation, plan ahead, be strategic about this. This is the biggest exit, the biggest financial decision of your life. And it has really big consequences. So don't leave it to a Wall Street Journal article.
Well, but I think you're tapping into something that is not always known by business owners, and I'm going to talk about kind of from my perspective there. When I look at, whether you call it Main Street or middle market, there's a threshold of usually $1 million of EBITDA that will put you into a different selling place, right? Different multiples, different buyers. In some respects, it's going to be more complex and more sophisticated buyers, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so they're really going to come in knowing how to get you to take less. But right. Above that, if you're not hitting that $1 million EBITDA threshold, then you are kind of in the smaller businesses or the Main Street businesses, and you could get an owner operator. You could get somebody that's like, hey, you're a competitor, and I've watched you forever. Well, I want to buy you for this amount. And sometimes that amount doesn't have a framework around it. It's just like, I feel it would be worth it to me to buy your business because I can add value to it. Okay. Right. But I'm not going to pay you for the value I can add to it. I'm going to pay you for the value you have added to it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that sometimes there's some confusion that EBITDA, is that normally kind of the threshold you're seeing? Is that $1 million EBITDA, or is it a different one now? Because things change.
Yeah, it kind of fluctuates. It goes anywhere from 1 to 3 million in EBITDA. And it just kind of depends on how hungry the private equity market gets, mm-hmm. and how much inventory is out there. So, last year and the year before that, we were seeing private equity coming down and making much smaller acquisitions and kind of cobbling companies together to get the size that they needed, because there wasn't a lot of inventory in the middle market. Mm. Today, they're kind of back up where they normally would be, and they're they're absorbing companies that are much bigger, 10, 20, $50 million companies. They're not coming down and they don't have an appetite for that $3 million company today, but that could change in a heartbeat. So you need to be prepared for that. But yeah, you're right. It's a whole different environment, and you just can't compare yourself and assume that you're apples to apples based on an article that you read or based on a friend or a family member that sold their company for a particular multiple.
Right. Yeah, it's a frustrating process, but you really do have to get your expectations right at the beginning. And again, that's why we tell people to plan ahead before it becomes a necessity to sell your business. Because if that price that you hear is not the one that you want, you can help create, you have a choice. You can sell now for a lower price, or you can create something different in a few years. So
Right.
it's always having control over the situation, but I think you also need to have a realistic view of the situation.